Welcome back here to News Talk. Millions of teens across the country, well, they are preparing for their first time living without mom and dad, heading off to college. And college can be a great experience, but it also shapes your financial future. From student loans to possible credit cards, teens are first time learning to manage their money on their own. Well, our next guest has some helpful tips to help prepare your students and also the parents for the transition. Welcome in Martin Smith. He is from Wealthcare Financial Group. And Mr. Smith, thank you so much for being here with us on the program.
It's good to be back.
Absolutely. So we want to talk about, first of all, when is too young? A lot of people talk about when should I start having the financial conversations with my children where it starts to set in for them. And should we start with teaching the value of a dollar, and how do I even begin to have that conversation?
I believe you start as early as you can.
Okay.
You know, our children, we have 7 children, and we start with
Amen to you.
Thank you. To my wife. We started with them when they were like 7 and 8 years old, just little things, you know, playing games and, you know, with their savings bank and so forth, a little piggy bank. So the conversation has to begin early.
Okay.
But unfortunately, with many kids, especially going through middle school, money management is not a subject that is typically taught in schools.
Right.
So many teens are lacking in this area. The National Financial Education Commission gave a financial literacy test to teenagers between the ages of between the ages of 15 and 18 years old, and the average score was a 60%. That's right.
That's
just above
not good.
failing. Not at all.
That's not good.
Not at all. So considering that financial decisions that people will make in college, good or bad, they're going to be with them for years to come.
Right.
And our job as parents and as a financial advisor such as myself, we want to make certain that they're getting off on the right financial foot.
In terms of, we're talking about, you know, we're at the beginning of August and a couple of weeks, a lot of kids packing up the bag, mom and dad taking them off to college for the first time, or they're heading back to college, and perhaps they don't have any knowledge of what they need to do, where they start. What would be a good starting point if someone is tuning in today and their kid's getting ready to head off to college in a couple of weeks? What is the first conversation they need to have to shape and start this?
Yeah, so if you're a parent and if you haven't had that conversation yet, don't fear. The first thing I think you should do is discuss budgeting. Budgeting is the backbone of a solid financial plan. And if you understand learning how to keep a budget consistent and over time, that's going to be a discipline that will serve them well throughout their lives. Separating your expenses from your income and making certain that you don't overspend. Budgeting is really the backbone that connects all the pieces together financially.
And needs versus wants as well.
Absolutely.
In terms of a lot of people who go to college, if they are fortunate enough to not have to pay for the college themselves or not have to take out loans, and perhaps their parents are paying for college and their parents want them to focus on schooling and they don't have a job, would you recommend that the parents even set up accounts, even if the parents are putting the money into it, making the student pay the bills, write the checks, get that responsibility underway, even if it's not their own money?
I would. I think parents should have their children establish a checking and a savings account. And if they haven't done so already, then your homework as a student is to open up a checking and savings account. A savings account is going to serve them well because you're going to get in that disciplined habit of putting aside some money on a regular basis.
Right.
You're not going to be walking around carrying lots of cash on hand, and of course you can lose it and so forth. A checking account is great because it ties back to that budgeting principle of having a paper trail when you're spending, when you're managing expenses, or you're writing a check, learning how to balance a checkbook. So those small disciplines are going to go a long way to help that individual.
If you have a comment or a question and you'd like to join in on the conversation, go ahead and give us a call on the News Talk line, 703-387-1020. As we continue this all-important conversation for so many people, we're going to delve into the other assets that come into this in terms of student loans, credit cards, things that people are taking on as they head off to college. Let's start with credit cards. I think the tough thing for people who are in college is thinking that, well, if I can just swipe the card, I can pay for it. And that seems to be very troublesome, not only then, but down the road when if you're just in school and you don't have a part-time job, it's just racking up on top of you. You know, you're getting into a dangerous situation.
Absolutely. And companies and marketing companies, they make it all too easy for you to swipe that card.
They're on college campuses handing out T-shirts and flyers and everything else to get you to sign up for a credit card.
Exactly. And that's what I tell my clients is, you know, if you have children, tell them, do not just go out and get a credit card because you were given some tchotchke, a free T-shirt or a USB cable, something.
Yes, because they're all over the place.
Exactly. And credit cards, they're great. It's the first true step towards financial independence for students. However, they can be very problematic, because if you don't understand the grace periods, how that work, or if you don't know what the APR, the interest rate is on the credit card, maybe there's an annual fee, things that you really need to look out for and do your due diligence before signing up for that obligation to have that debt in the first place. And if you're making late payments, and that's going to drag on your credit score. So it can be a very, very difficult thing if a student starts spending money on a credit card without thinking about the impact they're going to have later, and it could be devastating to their financial future. So there needs to be a lot of education done in that regard.
If you've got a student at home right now who's been at college a couple of years and they got themselves into that situation, maybe they're heading back for their junior or their senior year, what is the conversation as a parent you have with them, one, to try and get that balance down, obviously, and away, and two, moving forward?
I think the thing to do, really, because debit cards are so prevalent in our society today, with the Visa logo, I would take the credit card away and say, listen, use the debit card. You know what's in your bank account. You know what you have in your checking or savings account, and they're linked to the checking account. So it still has the Visa logo. You can do most things with a debit card that you could do with a credit card. You can rent a vehicle with a debit card with a Visa logo. And so reining in that child, if they've sort of gone out there and gotten a little wild and loose with the credit card, I think a debit card is the right way to go, because it reestablishes that pattern of looking at what's in your account and spending what you have, not spending and expecting, oh, I can just pay it later.
Well, let's move to, maybe you just graduated in May or June, and you're back home now, you're looking for that first job, and you've got the credit card debt, the student loans. When you're looking at an overall picture, and sometimes that's just the reality of going to college these days, it's very expensive to go to college, and if you were paying out of pocket yourself, perhaps some things like books and things like that had to be on the credit card. Now you've got the credit card and you've got the student loans. How do you balance out what's most important? What do you pay off first? And if you're getting into the job market very early on, you may not be making a ton of money to be putting into savings as well. What is the first steps, and how do you guide people in terms of what you take on first?
Well, the one benefit of a student loan is that you don't have to make the payment immediately. You can defer that until after graduation. Then there's other things like forbearance and different things they'll do to help you manage that debt and not have to deal with the large obligation initially. So you can kind of put that on hold a little bit, but I think students should at least try to pay the interest if they can while they're in college, or have their parents do so. And if you have credit card debt, go after the highest interest rate first, because that highest interest rate card is going to compound a lot faster and grow a lot larger. So I think you should attack that one first. And then also you can also consider calling the credit card companies, maybe looking at some sort of program that they may have to offer. You know, one thing that I used to do was, if I was given a credit card as a college student with like a $3,000 balance, I would say, listen, I want the balance to be $1,000, maybe make it $500, so you don't have to spend $3,000.
Maxing out that credit card. In terms of having that as an option, I know a lot of people will graduate and they'll have some credit card debt, and they'll say, you know, oh, I got this great thing in the mail about getting rid of my 15% or my 19% interest rate on this credit card. Is it legit? I think some people are concerned that if there's some hidden fee somewhere, that how are they just going to give me a year grace period of no interest, or letting me pay this down?
Just a marketing ploy to get a student to sign up for more debt. I think if you find a good card with a low interest rate with no annual fee, you keep it. Everyone's vying for that student's consumer business, and they're all too ready and eager to give them another credit card. I think if you could find one good card that has a low rate and no annual fee with a decent grace period, you're going to get tons of offers. Just throw them away. Stick with one card that you're familiar with, that works for you, and you're probably going to do best that way.
If you are packing up your kid, getting all the boxes ready and the toiletries and the extra long twin sheets for the dorm and all of that, what would you say would be the one thing that you would have parents instill in their children for that first year away from home as the top knowledge in terms of finances and making sure that they stay in a good realm in that term for the next 9-10 months when they're away from home?
I think a good discipline is budgeting. And this may sound like I'm just sort of rehashing the same thing, but we can't say enough about the importance of not spending more than what you have. You know, in budgeting your income.
Perhaps sitting down with your child and laying out this is what the tuition is, this is what the textbooks are, and this is the amount of money we'll give you on a semester basis to spend, or sort of putting it in front of them.
If you've got $3,000 or $4,000 for that semester to spend, that has to last. And so you're going to be thinking about discounts. When you go shopping for food, you're going to be looking to clip coupons hopefully. You know, if you're going to look for buy new clothes, you're going to look for sales. Think about how you can stretch the money for as long as possible. This isn't a big windfall to go and have a party and go crazy with it. No, you have to think specifically about making the money last for as long as you can. And so budgeting is key, and discipline is key. So that's why it's really important to have that checking account and that savings account. The balance is there, you know how much you have.
Right.
I think using a debit card is fine, because then you're going to constantly be thinking about
knowing what's in there.
Exactly.
And keeping a look at those statements. Don't just let them come in the mail or come in your email box and not look at them. Some great advice for students, Martin Smith. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with a check of today's top stories and your weekend forecast right after this.